Okay, so Matt Hatch from the Dusty Wheel and Daniel Greene from Daniel Greene, his YouTube channel is just called Daniel Greene, they made an epic, intense, long video addressing the casting controversy about the upcoming Wheel of Time series. And they obviously spent a lot of time and put a lot of research into their video. They were like digging into interviews from AOL and like Robert Jordan's notes from decades ago. They put a lot into that video. And well, I wanted to respond to it. The first thing I want to say in my response is that I love that they did that. I love that they spent that much time and effort into researching this topic because of a somewhat vocal minority, at least I hope it's a minority, of people in our sort of Wheel of Time community who have felt attacked or offended or upset, angered by the casting of non-white people in major roles in the Wheel of Time. I love that they felt that it was important enough to sort of shut down the debate for them to do that much research. I love that they did that. But what I don't like, what I hate, is that they felt that they had to do it. Because I find this whole debate ridiculous and hurtful. Obviously, I am an animated avatar. You do not know what I look like. But I will tell you, I picked this avatar because I am a black woman and I wanted an avatar that somewhat represents me. When I read these books, and I've been reading these books for decades, in my head all the characters are white because that's just the way fantasy generally is. And when I saw the casting, and I saw specifically that Nynaeve was going to be played by a black woman, it almost made me cry because I don't know that that's ever happened. I've been trying to think in my experience. I actually called into the Dusty Wheel show and sort of talked about this a little bit. I'm trying to remember if this has ever happened, and I really don't think it has. Unless it's something that is specifically about, quote unquote, the black experience, I don't think I've ever had a situation where my favorite character has been the character that looks most like me. And just to be clear, that's Zoe Robbins. I don't look like that. She is stunningly beautiful and I'm hiding behind a cartoon face. But she's a black woman and I am a black woman. Weirdly, when the casting announcement first came out, my hair was in braids, much almost virtually identical to her hairstyle. She is a somewhat light-skinned black woman. I am also a somewhat light-skinned black woman. It was just, it hit me like, oh my gosh, might be the first time I'm seeing myself in a show, seeing my physical representation in a show, and not just any show. These are my favorite books. I don't know that there's any other books that I have read as many times as I have read these books. It's incredible to me that this happened. And then the backlash from a certain segment of the fandom, it was hurtful. Because it basically was saying, no, someone looking like you can't be in this world. You can't be a main character. No. It was hurtful. But if I try and step back from the way it impacted me specifically, I also find the argument utterly ridiculous. I do not understand placing that much significance on the race of the characters. And I 100% know that wherever this is posted, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Reddit, that one of the first comments is going to be, it's not about race. We don't care about race. It's about protecting Robert Jordan's vision. And on that, I just have to call bullshit. Because, first of all, sometimes the physical descriptions that he gives are not possible. They're just sort of to give you a feeling. There are characters in these books that are described as being half as wide as they are tall. That's an insane physical description. That's insane. People who are half as wide as they are tall, you wouldn't notice anything else about them ever. They could sit there and be reciting the Odyssey to you, and all you would be thinking is, oh my god, that is a wide human. That is such a crazy thing to say about a person. And add to that, Robert Jordan himself didn't seem to be all that attached to his physical descriptions. In his own fan casting, and just an aside, I have to say I do find it a little bit odd that we call it his fan casting, because it's Robert Jordan casting his own series, but for some reason that's what everybody calls it, so I'm just going to use that terminology. It's weird though. When casting the main character of his series, Rand al'Thor, Robert Jordan himself cast Ben Affleck. And now Ben Affleck is pretty tall. I think he's said to be 6'3" or 6'4", so that's pretty close. But he does not have red hair, and he does not have gray eyes. And those are the two main things that everybody says about him, is his hair and his eyes. Those are the things that are brought up a lot, and yet Robert Jordan ignored those factors when picking an actor for the role. So people who say that they are trying to protect Robert Jordan's vision are trying to protect something that he did not think needed protecting. And they address this point in the video on Daniel Greene's channel. The next argument that I will often hear and see and read about this is that they don't want identity politics addressed in this show. They don't want, it to be taken over by woke SJWs who are ticking boxes and filling quotas. And this I am a black woman. Let you in on another little secret. Some of the keenest amongst you might have noticed my YouTube username, Lesbian Nerdy. I am also a lesbian, so I'm a black female lesbian. I'll let you in on another secret. I have a job, and I have friends, and I go grocery shopping, and I live a life where I interact with other human beings. I'll let you in on yet another secret about me. I don't do any of that as part of an agenda. When I go into my job and I'm working and teaching children, I just am doing my job. I just happen to exist. I'm not going into the grocery store as a black female lesbian. I am going into the grocery store as a human being who needs food. I am just doing it for the exact same reasons that white people do those things. There is no agenda. There is no SJW woke liberal conspiracy in my existence. I just exist. And in the world of Wheel of Time, it could be exactly the same. Black people just exist. And in saying that you have to explain and justify the existence of any minority, any other, is so insulting, because white is not the default setting of human. So why would it be the default setting in a fantasy world where we have monsters and flying beasts and magic? There's no reason that it has to be, at all. There's no reason that you have to explain away a person's race and justify a minority's existence any more than you have to justify a white person's existence. It is insulting. Another reason I find this argument totally ridiculous is that race is irrelevant to the story in these books. To me, quite frankly, if when Matt and Daniel were doing their research, they had stumbled across some obscure notebook that nobody had seen before, and they opened it up, and there, in Robert Jordan's handwriting, all of the main characters in Wheel of Time are white, by which I mean Caucasian, by which I mean of European heritage. To me, it still would be perfectly fine to change the race of the characters because their race has no impact on the story. If I think of Perrin's storyline throughout these books, the color of his skin, the texture of his hair, has no impact on the plot of his story at all. This is a world in which racism doesn't exist. There's no racial profiling. It doesn't matter what color he is, so why should it matter? It doesn't change the story one iota, so it doesn't matter. If, when you're reading the books, the race of the characters is that important to you, then I think that's something you need to examine in yourself before moving on with your life, because it's not important. He barely mentions it in the books, so why are you placing that much significance on it? Even if it was canon that they were all white, it doesn't change the point of the story. So why does it matter? It is also worth saying that by opening up the casting and leaving things open so that they didn't limit the cast to only white people, simply just logistically speaking, allowing people of different races to apply and audition for the role means that they are more likely to get better actors, just because when you exclude people, you are quite possibly excluding amazing talent. Secondly, having minorities in the cast makes the show more accessible to more people. I can tell you that if I had never read these books, but was still just me, still just a nerd who really liked fantasy, and I happened to be flipping channels or scrolling through, Amazon or whatever, and I saw what looked like a fantasy show based on, the set design and whatever, and there were black people in it, I would stop, because that would make me curious. I've never seen a fantasy world where there seems to be black people and white people all interacting, and wow, that's interesting. It would make me stop. It would make me feel, oh, I'm welcome in this world. This is a world that isn't going to exclude me. I know that saying things like representation matters can seem like virtue signaling, but it's just true. I've always thought of that phrase and how it applies to me as a black person, as a woman, as a gay person. But it was actually watching a video on a favorite YouTuber of mine, Murphy Napier, when she was talking about Percy Jackson and how the main character, Percy Jackson, I guess, I've actually never read those books, but how he is dyslexic and how it surprised her how much that meant to her. And that to me was a revelation moment of, oh my goodness, yeah, that would matter to you. And it got me thinking and realizing that I would bet you everybody, even your most average, your most cisgendered, heterosexual white man, has had a moment of seeing something about himself reflected in a book that's not about his whiteness or his maleness or his heterosexuality or whatever, but something about his personality that he was like, oh, I'm probably the only person who feels this way. And then he reads a book and there's a character that feels that way and he, oh, I'm not alone. That feeling is a good feeling when you see yourself reflected in it. Having something as immutable as your race, your gender, your sexuality, your gender orientation, having that never reflected back to you can totally make you feel alone. And so making the show more accessible is only going to make more people watch it. And to me, that is only a good thing for the show, for the books, for our community. I find wanting to limit it short-sighted. And finally, to those people who feel that watching this show with minority characters, with minority actors in the role of some of these main characters is going to break the show for you. You are not going to be able to get past it. I would like to suggest that you talk to one or a few of your minority friends and ask how we get past the fact that the vast majority of media we watch is full of white people. I'll just give you an example. I was going to university in the 90s, and I, along with all of my friends, every single person I knew, we all were watching the show Friends. We were all obsessed with it. The show Friends is about 6 people who live in New York City, and somehow, for nearly 10 years, they managed to live in New York City without having a single meaningful interaction with a black person. Considering that Friends is supposed to be taking place in the real world, the only way you could do that for 10 years is if you were actively avoiding interacting with black people, which means that if I am going to focus on the race of the characters, then Friends is about 6 racists who live in New York City. But you know what I did when I watched Friends in the 90s? Is I just didn't think about it. Because you know what? The race of the characters in no way mattered. It literally had nothing to do with any of their storylines, so it wasn't important, and I didn't focus on it. That is my suggestion. Don't focus on it. It's not important. It doesn't impact their storyline. Don't pay attention to it. Enjoy the books. Enjoy the story. Enjoy the show. At least hopefully we're all fingers crossed hoping that it's going to be good. And get past it. So yeah. This is my response to that video. And again, this is in no way shading Matt or Daniel. I love that they did that. I love that they really wanted to shut down this debate because it is ridiculous. It's 2020. We shouldn't still be having to justify hiring non-white people in 2020. This shouldn't be a discussion. It shouldn't be a discussion. So yeah, that's my thoughts. That's my response. I'm not sure if I'm actually going to post this video. I'm nervous about it. But, that's it. So I'll end it as I always do with the whole like, subscribe, and leave it at that. Hopefully you come back. And if you do, I'll see you next time. Bye.